Is New World worth returning to? That's the question I want to try and answer with this video. I left New World, along with many other people, not actually that long after the game's initial release, but I've recently been checking out some of the more interesting content updates and changes they've been making to the game to see kind of how it's evolved and if it has actually improved at all and is worth getting back into. I think to really answer this, we've got to go back in time slightly. I'm sure some of you watching this video will have never played New World at all, but actually many of you will have, and you'll have joined back at the start, September 2021, when the game launched, but it certainly wasn't exactly a very smooth launch. It had real stability issues, lack of content, longer joining times than the queue to see the Queen. Despite that, the game still managed to peak at basically 1 million concurrent players in the first week of its launch. It launched really very successfully. But it didn't really last very long. The game's many problems soon saw player numbers starting to decline, and really, by May 22, Steam charts show that really numbers were down to about 20k. It's a really big drop from the 1 million at the start. So, what's changed? Have the problems of the lack of endgame content, clunky PvP, weapon imbalance, territory war issues, have these things been solved? Why might you now consider returning to New World? Well, since I've sort of come back and had a look, quite a lot has changed. We've very recently had the Brimstone expansion. Added a whole new endgame zone, new expedition in the form of the Ennead, a new weapon, the Greatsword, alongside the Blunderbuss and the Void Gauntlet that have also been added in since the game's release. It's had new PvP options in 3v3 arenas, improved Outpost Rush. These territory wars and Outpost Rush are now instanced rather than open world events, which means they run much more smoothly. But I guess it's also worth asking, does adding all this extra new content, does adding expeditions, adding new endgame zones, actually solve any of the game's core problems? And so I kind of want to give an example of why I think it sort of has, at least in part. So when I first started playing the game at launch, the new player experience basically consisted of 3 types of very similar quests. Either travel to X, kill X, or basically go and collect X. And really, it got dull pretty quickly because that was the main way of levelling. But they have completely reworked the new player experience, really cutting down on the amount of travelling required, sort of clumping the quests a lot more together, as well as introducing a much more immersive story experience, actually turning the levelling into at least a slightly enjoyable experience and not just a complete flat-out grind. And you may well be thinking, that's great, but why just talk about the new player experience? How does that help me? Well, it's because I think it represents a shift in Amazon Game Studios' attitude to development and quality of life. It's not just the new player experience that has improved. They've also addressed a lot of the other quality of life problems. We now have larger servers. Storage is linked across the territories. No longer do you have to wander between different towns just to collect the iron ore you left in a separate storage. Travelling itself is also much cheaper. It doesn't require a whole bank's worth of Azoth for one trip across, along with extra shrines to give more fast travel points. A group finder now exists. Hooray! Expeditions are no longer events that are basically excluded for solo players. And actually, it's a really well thought out group finder as well. Core player info is available to the group lead, they can see gear score, they can see their weapon mastery level, and you classify people as DPS, tank and healer, and they can request what type of classification they're looking for. Makes it a really nice and intuitive system. Respecking is now much cheaper, so it makes it far more easy and accessible to check out new weapon classes. Start with something, decide you don't like it, it's actually really easy to change. Weapon balance has also been pretty significantly improved, feeling like a much more balanced game, although I must say at times, ranged can still like a pretty powerful meta in PvP. And these improvements have resulted in more and more players returning to pick up the game. Average player numbers have more than doubled since the summer, and with the Fresh Start server due to kick off on the 2nd of November, I think it's fair to say that we can expect that trend to continue. But I suppose it can't be all good news, right? What are some of the problems that the game still faces? I think one is that some of the busier servers still have some pretty hefty queues, up to 2 hours at peak sort of evening time, which isn't a lot of fun. And I think with the new Fresh Start servers releasing, there's certainly going to be some hefty queues on some of them, particularly on some of the busier servers. As of the time of recording this, we haven't actually got server announcement yet, so we don't quite know how many or sort of the names of these servers, but I think we're going to get some pretty peak ones. Getting kills on certain mobs in busy areas can still be a problem, and we are still missing many of kind of core guild mechanics. There is no shared guild bank or guild storage. There's nothing like a guild ledger. Who donated money, this sort of thing makes organising quite difficult. No guild housing. More problems which do, I think, need to be addressed. But perhaps the biggest criticism might be still based around the endgame content at level 60. I mean, it is certainly improved from where it was, and there is actually now a lot more to do in the endgame than when, New World actually launched last year. But a lot of the additions are based around the same concepts as the launch game. Extra expeditions, new regions, more quests, nothing really that's been developed as distinctly new types of content. And it just means that New World just slightly lacks this kind of replayability that other games in the MMO genre have. But having said all that, I still feel like the game is actually moving in the right direction now. It has improved a lot over the past year, and I think it's going to continue to improve as time goes on. Add on to this that we are getting Fresh Start servers, well, kicking off today, by the time this video actually comes out, November the 2nd, which is always kind of exciting. Everyone starting back at the beginning, at level 1, no advantages, no facing off against, fully geared out level 60 players while, you're just trying to level up. It means we're going to be back to territory wars, everyone much more on an equal footing, which is going to be really fun, and I'm honestly really looking forward to it. Personally, I'll be playing tomorrow once the EU servers are online. Or today actually, by the time this video comes out. I'm probably most likely streaming it here, on this channel. I'm not going to be going on a sort of super crazy hard grind this time. Already done that once the first time around, so I'm going to be on a slightly more enjoyable grind this time. Probably going to be running quests initially, just in a small group. Once I've got a few levels under my belt, probably dabble in a few of the elite zones, running a few dungeons, but probably mostly questing. I've not yet actually settled on my final 2 weapons I'm going to be running, but probably going to be a hatchet at the start, just for the mobility bonus it gives, to be honest. But either way, I am genuinely looking forward to playing New World again at the start, and getting stuck back into a little bit of grinding. But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the game. Are you an old player who's going to be returning, or kind of have you looked and decided it just hasn't improved enough to spark your interest? Either way, would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments down below. We'll probably be doing a little bit of New World streaming, so if you're new, do subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching, guys, and I shall see you all on the next one.